You know that moment when someone questions you at work, and instead of just answering, you start explaining. You add context, you justify your reasoning, you make sure they understand your thought process. And by the end of it, you've talked way longer than you need to. Not because you didn't know the answer, but because you didn't want to be misunderstood. If that feels familiar, I want to talk about why saying less at work can feel almost physically uncomfortable and what that's actually about. A lot of capable women don't struggle with communication. They struggle with permission. Permission to be brief, permission to be direct, permission to let something land without cushioning it. This usually doesn't look dramatic. It looks like adding extra sentences to make sure no one feels criticized, softening feedback so much it loses its clarity, over explaining decisions so you don't seem bossy. And none of it feels like insecurity in the moment. It feels like being thorough, being thoughtful, being professional. But underneath that pattern is usually one quiet fear. If I don't explain myself enough, I'll be seen as difficult or careless or aggressive or unprepared. So instead of risking misinterpretation, you manage it in advance. You over clarify, you over contextualize, you over smooth. And it works until it doesn't. Because the cost of over explaining isn't just time, it's your authority. When you constantly justify your decisions, people subconsciously learn that your decisions require justification. When you soften every boundary, people learn it's flexible. When you over explain, you communicate that you're uncertain. And even if you are, I see this with coaching clients who are extremely competent, but they feel overlooked. When we slow down conversations they've had at work, we often notice how much extra language they're actually carrying. They're not being unclear, they're being protective. And that protection usually started for a reason. Maybe earlier in your career, you were misunderstood. Maybe you experienced microaggressions. Maybe you were labeled too much once and you decided to adjust. So now you preemptively manage perception. That makes sense. But it's also draining you, sis. Because every time you filter, cushion, and manage how your words might land, your nervous system stays slightly activated. You're not just communicating, you're monitoring. And monitoring is work. The shift here isn't to suddenly become blunt or sharp, it's to experiment with less. Shorter answers, clearer statements, fewer disclaimers, letting silence do some of the work. At first, that can feel uncomfortable because you're not filling the space the way you normally would. But discomfort isn't danger. Sometimes it's just unfamiliar. When clients practice saying less, something interesting happens. Their presence grows. Not because they change their personality, but because they stop shrinking it. If you recognize yourself in this, it doesn't mean you're bad at communication. It means you've been working hard to stay safe. Coaching helps you separate the real risk from imagined risk so you can speak clearly without carrying the emotional weight of everyone's perception. You don't have to explain your existence to do your job well. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.